So when we last left our heroes, we were talking about color as it would be perceived and talked about in print. So in printing with yellow, magenta, and cyan are the colors of the process inks that are used to process color reproduction. And as Richard mentioned when he was here, it really is good if you can get an archival quality printer to use archival quality ink, and your photographs will maintain their integrity for decades as compared to the, you use the commercial inks that you can buy from the companies themselves. They are actually low grade in comparison. And the idea is to, if you ever buy razors, I know some people shave their legs or armpits, and the razors are cheap. You pay for the blades, or you pay more for a pack of blades than you pay for the razor. Matter of fact, one of the things I realized is that there was a time when you could buy batteries. You buy a block of batteries and they give you a free ship for a razor. You think, dang, free razor! Right? So I use it, it's a good razor. I went to buy the replacement blades and it was $20. That was more than the batteries cost when I bought them. $20 for the replacement blades. And they wear out quickly. So don't skimp on ink. Use archival quality and buy an archival quality printer if you can. So in the process, it's called a 4-color process. And then even permutations of it, as you'll see in just a moment, still relate to the 4-color process. So if you were to look at a table for the red, yellow, and blue, when they are reproducing the pure color red, it's going to be magenta and yellow. Those colors are going to be combined with the dye or ink to produce this color, and just a touch of black. K stands for black. Why do you think they use a K instead of a B? Why does, in the 4-color process, instead to represent black, they use the letter K as compared to the letter B. Blue. So it could be confusing using a B, because blue also begins with that color. So they use K to represent black, or PK, which means print black. If you're using yellow, there's going to be yellow, a touch of magenta, but no black or cyan. When you're reproducing the color blue, you're using cyan and a touch of magenta, but no yellow or black. So adding black to any of these colors actually enhances the contrast just a bit. But when you start to add too much black, you can actually have the opposite effect. It will actually start to dull or even mute and turn everything to gray. So if you'll stand up for just a moment and come over here. And if you look at this Epson Stylus Pro 9600, this is the printer I have on steroids, because mine is only about this big, and it will only print, it's actually about this big, it will only print 13 inches, and then as long as I want, if I'm using scroll-fed paper, as this is using, for example. But you'll note, yellow, light magenta, light cyan, magenta, cyan, light black, and then matte black. But the way they would correspond would be with the CYMK. And actually, the only one that can really see that looks like it, because if you think, what is cyan? Until we talked about it today, would you have known what cyan was? Maybe if you looked at your little Hewlett-Packard cartridges, sorry, but most people don't know that to some degree relates to blue. as compared to magenta, which relates more to red, but actually seems to be more of a moving toward a pink. So when we're thinking about print and archival ink and print for catalogs, these are the colors we're going to be considering. So, and then once again, if you're, I mean, of course, if you're in you know, a one-person operation in your little tribal center, and you're the curator, registrar, conservator, and the docent, and you take admission at the door, all right? You've got 7 jobs under once, and you can barely afford a printer. You might be working with the little 3-color, right? But if you can, move towards something that is archival quality. It doesn't have to be the 9600. There are others that are considerably cheaper now. Gosh, you can buy actually a better printer than the one I have now, the 2400, a better printer for less money now. That will still do archival quality ink and archival quality photographs. And when you're reproducing this for a permanent record, or for that matter, when you want to see how it's going to look, because once your catalog is done, ideally, and we're not going to be able to do that here, ideally you want to be able to print it out to see how it's going to look when someone decides on their own to print on demand. And do you get a match in what you laid out with what is printed out? So ideally, you want to be able to print it out, but you may not be able to. But if you use just the commercial HP printer, you're going to get a little bit of inaccuracy. So, okay. When we talk about texture, that's the tactile quality of a surface or representation of a surface. And they can be real, so we can actually touch the surfaces with our fingers. Or they can be an illusion and give the impression of a real texture, that we suspend the illusion. Or I'm sorry, we suspend the expectation of reality and we accept the illusion. So in, for example, in Photoshop, you've got an image or a shape, and you can actually make it look like it's 3-dimensional, by buttonizing it. And if you know, if you use that little function, buttonize, it actually makes that circle look like it's a button. And it has the illusion of being 3-dimensional. And that's when we're looking at texture also. But we can also do it in such a way where elements are juxtaposed against each other or around each other. So part of texture, too, is not only in the quality of the line here, because it's a very thick line, but it's also broken up. But then elements that are behind it. So this appears to be floating closer to you. So sometimes in the printed page, you can create tension by obscuring part of one image of text with another, but giving enough information where people will fill in the blanks. That our eyes will actually forgive a certain amount of absence of information. Texture. Have you ever heard of the style of painting called pointillation? Who's known for pointillation? Who's the painter? Seurat being one of them. And have you ever seen the painting, The Bathers, or I think it's The Bathers, where the painting was done with hundreds of thousands of dots. Yet when you're far enough away from the painting, your eyes pull all the dots together to create a complete shape. And actually, even when you're looking at your screen, your monitor, this is pointillation. because and in the earlier cathode ray tubes, you don't get as high definition as you do on these monitors. But what's actually happening is you're getting little circles of light, almost like individual light bulbs. That's also texture. Well, we might even say on a monitor being resolution. Think about this when you're designing a catalog cover or a poster for an exhibition. We talked about pattern and part of rhythm when we're looking at web pages. So if we look at a repetitive arrangement of elements, it could be like wrap and paper design or a plaid shirt design. In this case, if we look at the repeated elements or repeated pattern, we would look at not only the stairs that are repeated here, but we see opposing the stairs, another set of stairs, there is a pattern in which the visual elements appear as they move along the stairs in a clockwise manner. And because I do not want to drive you crazy when you're doing your poster, brochure, or catalog cover, you won't need to worry about creating any of these graphical elements. You'll be using a photograph of an image, a photograph of a piece of art. But then how do you creatively arrange text with that photograph, or photographs to create a visually stimulating cover or brochure? So you're not going to have to worry about working with Adobe Illustrator or Photoshop or something like that to create an image. You're welcome to, but you'll be doing that in a graphic design class, which we do have graphic design here at IIA. And if you've ever been in the hallway next to where Seth has the equipment, you see those posters along the wall, right? Environmental graphic design. That's where you'll be using Illustrator as well as possibly InDesign. We also want to look at balance, an equal distribution of weight. That's not only weight of mind, but letters within images. And I mentioned earlier about something being symmetric or asymmetric. Relates to balance. Symmetric generally means that you can look at an image and almost fold it in half and have it mirror itself. As compared to asymmetric, it may have a balance and symmetry within it, but it wouldn't be that exact mirror image. It folded on an axis. So when we're saying symmetry, the arrangement of all identical or similar visual elements are distributed so that they are on either side of this invisible vertical or horizontal axis, almost like a mirror image. So while A is not an exact mirror of H, it's still based on the shape as a symmetry if we fold it in half. It needs the shape that while the left side of her head is not identical to her right side of her head, it's still a close enough approximation that it would be shaped on this central vertical axis. And this is what many designers do out of laziness. It's very easy to go to symmetry, everything being centrally oriented. And it works. It's quick, dirty, it works, and it's we need to get something done in a pinch, right? This is the way to go. So You may have found out that there's going to be an event in a week that you didn't know about. And all of a sudden they tell you you've got to produce this poster. It's really easy to go with the center and the symmetry. If you have a little bit more time, then you can start to play around with it. Because there's some very fun things that can be done with these exact same elements and not use a symmetrical balance with an asymmetric. When it is asymmetric, you're arranging dissimilar or unequal elements of equal weight. So it still has a visual unity. And generally, when we see asymmetrical arrangement, we have become visually conditioned to expect there's going to be some type of artistic or musical function that this is creating an announcement for. In general, you wouldn't expect someone to, wouldn't read a menu like this, you wouldn't expect food to be served here, these are arts and farces, they may say. Right? And you want the layout to mirror the function as much as you can. So this tells us right away there's something more than just a T dinner, something more going on. So if you were to fold any of these, they would not match up identically. And then emphasis. We talked about this somewhat in the previous section when we talked about what is it we want people to focus upon first, and how do we stress the importance of some of the visual elements. But for one, when we are doing emphasis, it allows the viewer a quick view to get the most important information. And it also allows the design to be easily received because it has been made quick and simple. So for an event, you want to make sure the date, time, and location are very prominent. And then focal point, part of the design that is the most accentuated. In general, I try to dissuade people from using any shade of yellow as the background color on which images or text are being juxtaposed. On a monitor, you feel like you're looking at the sun, it hurts your eyes, and in print, it can be just as visually irritating. To me, the color yellow on a whole page is irritating, whether it's on the web or on the printed page. But sometimes it can achieve a visual effect, because it definitely does stand out. What has started to happen, though, particularly with using these shades of yellow or shades of pink, and this is a very, very real reflection of design and advertising, and the earlier days of snail mail. Because in snail mail, you want to cause something to, if you're sending out an advertisement for something, you want it to stand out. So what did they start to do? What did the various advertising firms start to do? To make that piece of mail stand out from all your other mail. They made it a brighter color. Now when you go to your mailbox and you see a really brightly colored thing, there's a tendency to take it and throw it out. Because you know that it's something trying to take your money or your time. So, with that awareness, designers switch to something else to get your attention. What do? It's actually pretty clever. Telemarketing is one, all right, by nagging you right on the phone, but in print, what do? In the mail. Same way. Okay, that worked for a while too. You're the winner. All right. All right, or you've been selected to be a winner. That actually fell to the wayside. So what did they move to get your attention? What's that?
Red letters.
That's another important must read, or a little cellophane window with the words that say pay to the order of. And that's in cities. Because pay to the order of, someone might be sending you something, and we all need money. So there's a stronger likelihood of us opening an envelope that says pay to the order of. Because you don't want to throw out your tax return check, your bonus, your financial aid, whatever it is that's coming by snail mail. These are all conscious decisions that are made designers to get your attention. Focal point. And I'll tell you what, pay to the order of is one of the biggest focal points in this country. And then the visual hierarchy, arranging elements according to emphasis, and establish the priority. I'm recapping some of this as a reminder, because these are more related to poster layouts as compared to the printed page layouts that we looked at earlier. So primacy in this is going to be the image with the juxtaposition of the lettering cancer care incorporated. Now, there was a conscious reason that this designer used a cursive format here. It makes it just a little bit more friendly. It's really hard to spell cancer without it being intimidating. So you make it a little bit softer, a little bit more cute. So even in emphasis, thinking about typography, and there are conscious decisions why designers will violate rules. Because there is this awareness of perception. Rhythm, shown a little bit earlier with an illustrative image as compared to juxtaposing photographs with text. So another example, and actually when you're doing your catalog covers and the like, this is one of the ways that you can use rhythm with images and text without having to use Illustrator. So you have a rhythm not only of the way the faces appear, but also a rhythm of the cha-cha-cha-chas as the text is overlaid. And when you're doing this, you're aware that you can do this in Photoshop and create a poster cover in Photoshop, and you're working with layers. The same way when we were doing layout with the old waxers, you were using layers. It's just you peel the layers up with the wax, so you have text and then image on top of it. The layers were distinct from one another. And so in Photoshop, you can actually, if you have one layer that's all just the lettering, cha-cha-cha-cha, So you can see how the rhythm works in the faces just by muting that layer. And the text vanishes, and then you just see the faces. Or you can see how the text with each other works with each other by muting the faces and seeing just the text. That's one of the wonderful things about non-destructive editing and design. So you could, for example, in a catalog, take 3 or 4 representative works from the exhibition, have them set out in a rhythmic pattern on a page. Another thing that's been done here, all right, that the image itself has been tilted slightly, and then it's placed on an illusion of a corrugated metal. And this is actually supposed to look like metal in the background, possibly like an old-fashioned dance floor hall. Either either metal or wood floors. Which is another kind of texture. Unity, when elements look like they belong together. You remember the margarita and the margarita salt, or mix and the salt, all those elements belong together. And you want that unity to be accomplished through the images and the text. And for that matter, the empty space. Or a negative space. This is one case, for example, where if we were to use the rule of thirds, it may not be so effective. Because if we were to take, even though it's a unified set of elements here, if we were to move these and just put them all up here, that actually, many people would look irritating. Because what was going on in all this space over here then? Sometimes the central location of elements is important. And once again, that's one of the wonderful things about non-destructive editing. You can move that thing around, you can cartoon it. You can expand the canvas, you can crop it, you can cut out certain parts of it, and you've still got the original. Because all you've done is you've given the computer instructions to move something. Of course, it can be the original is still there as long as you don't overwrite the original. And then the type of correspondence between the elements. That when something is repeated, like color, direction, value, text, there is this connection. So when we see correspondence here, we have correspondence not only in the cubes, in the rectangles, we have correspondence in typeface and type size, typeface, interspersed text, graphical element, text, graphical element, text, graphic element, text, graphic, text, graphic, text, graphic. A catalog cover could have possibly 5 objects of an exhibition laid out in a grid, interspersed with. If it's an art catalog, I wouldn't have all of this text on. I might actually have that be more muted, colored space. Mirroring the colors that are in the objects that are in the exhibit. We talked about grids being guides, single or multi-page formats. I hope you're getting the impression, and why I'm doing this again, is that grid is really important for balance, continuity, cohesiveness. alignment are the connections that we make between the elements, shapes, objects when their edges or their axes line up with one another. I talked about text alignment, where you can have something where it's justified left, justified right, or justified center, or just completely justified so the text looks like a block. So this is justified text on this side, but you'll note that it's ragged here. So we could say justified left or ragged right. If the space between the letters, because the computer will insert space between letters. In old days, in order to make a completely justified galley or block of text, they call it leading. There would be little pieces of lead that had no letters in them that would be inserted in between spaces to push this letter so it completely would line up with the edge of the S. And so that the end would completely line up with the S. That's called leading. There were little lead pieces that were inserted in the blocks so that it would look like completely justified. So ragged left, ragged right, complete justification, or justified center. Flow, how things are how they are arranged so that we are led from one element to another throughout the whole design. So it's not only on the page, but also throughout every page in the brochure or catalog. There is a flow. The same way when you walk into an exhibit, there is a flow. And it is connected to rhythm because we're looking at it as how a flow goes throughout a multi-page document that you're designing. One of the things I noticed, and this really caused me to think, in three-dimensional space, and I think I mentioned earlier in the semester, when you're in a large museum, people tend to, or when you're in law, people tend to turn to the right when they go in the doors. One of the things I noticed, for example, a primitive edge, most people when they go in actually turn to the left. And I wonder if the size of the space affects the way that people walk. But I do things like that. When I go to an exhibit, I rarely look at the work. I look at people looking at the work. To me, that's much more interesting. I can go back and look at the work, but I'm only going to see canvas in front of that painting once. So I want to see what canvas does. Because I can watch canvas walk along, and just walks by, walks along, just walks by. And then all of a sudden, something is really visually stimulating. And then I'll watch how her eyes will move on that piece of work. And then we'll go back later and say, okay, what was it that caused this person to look at it this way? Why did they stop? Right? You don't want to be one of those artists where people just look and then continue to walk. So what was it that was successful? It's the same way when you're laying out a catalog. Have someone else look at it and watch their eyes. And their eyes move the same way you intended as you lay it out. You can drive your sweethearts, kids, spouses, crazy. But it helps to have another set of eyes to see people's eyes move throughout this the way I want. Positive and negative space. thing that's interesting with this particular piece poster is you've got Godzilla and King Kong. And my generation remembers the movie Godzilla versus King Kong. Right? And they actually do not resolve peacefully. But with Godzilla and King Kong, there's actually, you've got the shape and enough of the white here to let you know that one is a really big gorilla and one is Zilla. But it's mostly the absence of color and negative space that's used to create the shape. And then negative space, and yet also the sun. So you've got negative space, and actually negative space, and yet a cohesive and symmetric positive and negative relationship. Ultimately, what we are doing is we are creating illusions. It is possible to create the illusion of three-dimensional space, or to create the illusion of spatial depth by the layers that we are using. How items are layered on a surface. It can be shallow, deep, recessive, or projected. So as we see here, the text appears to be floating in front of this person's face. Floating in front of the text is this scrap of paper. And the backdrop to it all is the United States flag. It's the illusion of depth by using different layers. So when you're in design or in Photoshop and you're wondering why something isn't showing through, it's because it may be you have given primacy to a layer to make it show up front. But you actually have control of where in that stack of text and images and titles or shapes you have placed it. And you can manipulate that to create